Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see you all again. Let me read my script. I, David Greaves, Chair of the Senate Bill 1547 Rules Advisory Committee of the Board of Psychology, call this committee meeting to order at 2:01 p.m. on Monday, July 27th, 2026, via Zoom video conference. I will now call roll. Eddie Carrillo.
Here.
Thank you, Eddie. And Robin Henderson.
Here. Sorry, I've got a technical difficulty.
That was kind of cool, though. I will tell
There's
you.
an echo.
Uh, sounded like your walk-in announcement when for your MMA or whatever. Lori Henry,
Here.
Larson Hills,
Here.
and Laura Smith, and Kate McLaughlin. I think you said she's en route.
Yep, she'll be here.
Okay, we do have quorum though. So, the committee will now convene in public session. Members of the public are instructed to refrain from making comments during the meeting. Zoom attendees who disrupt the meeting may have their microphones muted, their cameras turned off, or they may be removed from the meeting. Okay, well, again, thank you all for being here today. Two quick caveats. I have a hard stop at 4 o'clock today, so we will need to we'll try to move through. I like to try to wrap it up at 4 o'clock anyway, but we have to absolutely do that today. And second, Larry, we have now met for 60% of the time that we had budgeted to go through this. Would you say we're 60% through the task at this point?
Uh, Probably not.
Okay.
We still have some major rule making areas, and we haven't even started talking about the fiscal and the racial impact statement and the other things that are in the
Okay.
packet for today.
So I say that because we want to, we're all dealing with timelines. This has to get to the Board of Psychology. We're talking about probably for the September meeting for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I know we've got this meeting and one more meeting, and hopefully we can hustle and get it done. But if you hear me pressing, that's probably why. That'll be my role. But tell me to back off if I need to, but I will just try to keep us moving. So with that, Larry, let me turn it back over to you and let's pick up where we left off.
Would you like to start back at fees? I know that was
Sure.
I mean, going in order of divisions, that would be the first step, even though it's kind of a hot topic. I can share my screen. I've got it ready.
Great. Let's go ahead and start there.
Okay.
All right. And so where we left off was the application fees, I believe, renewal fees. And I think the essence here was that the amount that we were talking about was basically the same amount that a psychologist has to pay, which seemed, in some ways, psychologists financially are in a much better situation than a bachelor's level person. The challenge was, though, that it's a expensive board essentially that we have to work with. And so the only other way to make this work would be to have the board absorb the extra costs that come in. I will tell you all that I had a psychology board meeting in July, and I mentioned to them in the public session about this, that this was a topic. And my recollection, and Todd, Lee, you can remind me, I think they were also kind of mixed. Like on the one hand, they said, "Ooh, that's a lot of money." But on the other hand, they're not sure what we do otherwise. So I think everyone recognizes that this is a challenge. So as it's written right now, Laurie, do we have an amount or do we kind of leave it open?
So I'm just basically, last meeting, there was a handout that showed sort of compared the two license types and what we're going to be expecting in terms of workload, and pretty much demonstrated that it looks like about the same. I mean, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know if the character and fitness reviews are going to take longer for this new license type. We don't know if they're going to get more investigations. So we're assuming those things even at this point. What does the workload look like in terms of answering questions to applicants, processing renewals, doing all the things and it looks pretty even. So that was our recommendation at the last meeting. This rule draft just sort of changes things around, and it's sort of, we reiterate that we can't have one license type funding the other. We asked council about it. That is how it is. So having that in mind, that is just the recommendation. So the committee needs to determine where it's going to put these fees at. So I have 3 spots here. We have application, renewal, and delinquent fee.
Okay. So I would love people's thoughts on this, kind of where we're at. Let's see. I thought I saw a hand just go up.
I think Robin, you had your hand up first.
Okay, Rob and then Lori.
Yes,
Okay.
and my apologies. My camera appears to not be working. Is my microphone working?
Yes.
Okay. I'm waiting for my other device to update, so I'll be on camera soon. Um, I I am struggling with this is a bachelor's level position that was created to help with a workforce shortage, that licensure fee basically takes it out. Um, I would like to see how creative we can start thinking about some other way of doing things so that we have something that's not more than $200 a biennium, which I think would be more appropriate and in line for a bachelor's level provider. And how can we think creatively about how to get there and do that? I know that you all are resistant to having some type of long-term general fund allocation, but no one will go for this degree if the licensure fee is $600 every 2 years. So I'd like us to figure out how we can do this differently.
Okay. Let's see. So I think Lori and Kate both had thoughts.
Okay, so I think Robin, you're speaking a little bit to where I was going to go, which is like, okay, what do we think is a realistic number? And then is there a way to make that happen or split the difference and, figure out the way the psych board picks that up? Um, but my understanding is that that 325 number is for the 2 years. It wouldn't be $600 for 2 years, right?
The
No, that's
325 is the initial application fee, and it is actually, that is a better price compared to psychology because psychology also pays the jurisprudence exam fee. We had contemplated this new license type to have that exam since it's not such a beast of an exam, it's not going to take as much development work in the inside. That would be included in there, so they wouldn't pay that separate fee. But then if you look down below under 3D, that's the separate fee, and that's where psychology at active status is $600. Because this license type, we're not building in an inactive for it.
Yeah, that's a lot.
it is.
And I mean, if we can find a lower way to do this, like, I think that that would be really, really impactful. I just don't know where's the money come from. So,
Yeah, great. Kate,
Yeah, I guess I think I will sort of echo the sentiment that I wouldn't feel comfortable landing on a fee that high for folks trained at this level. And I don't know that this is the, space to think through how to come up with a difference. But I looked at Nevada and what they are charging is $200, both for initial licensure. They do renewals every 3 years, but $200 seems to me like a reasonable place for the fee to land in terms of what we could expect folks trained at this level and with this earning potential to be able to pay reasonably and to be, still incentivized to get this training and pursue this license. I assume, in the service of the amount of time we have together, resolving sort of how to make up that difference is not the work of this group, or maybe it is, I don't know. But I will say, I think there are some simple short-term solutions that could cover the difference and, buy some time to figuring it out in the long term. But I don't know if this is the right venue for discussing that. But from my perspective, I agree with Robin and with, our attempts to align with Nevada, they have landed on $200.
okay. Laura?
First, I apologize for being late. I got caught up with another phone call. Secondly, I guess I'm going to pile on here. representing NAMI, I'm really concerned about this level of fee. NAMI's long-term goal is to really make sure that everybody providing services has some level of oversight and accountability to consumers. And obviously, this will be a challenge for this level of provider. NAMI's working right now, has a work group that's looking at doing something similar with the QMHPs. And, there's no way, if we set the precedence with this level of fee, there's no way we're going to be able to get there with QMHPs. So once again, I would also encourage us to try to be creative and think outside of the box on this. Thank you.
All right. Well, I mean, it sounds like that's where everyone's at on this. I think the reality is either we need to find some way to pay for this, and I don't know what that is, or we reduce the amount of oversight so that we just don't have the cost. I don't know if that causes heartburn for people, but that would be a way to reduce this as well. It costs money to have oversight, and the oversight is expensive. And we don't, as was pointed out, we got $0 from the legislature in this initiative. So, yeah, I don't know if Laurie, if this is something that we have to hack out where this extra money would come from, or if we as a group would just say we want to list it at this number and we're going to have to figure out how to make it work. What can we do at this point? And
Well,
Rob, your
the
hands up.
recommendation does need to go to the board by the last RAC meeting is, I think a few weeks from now. So that's sort of the last opportunity to finalize this rule set and get a recommendation to the board. The board is the final decision authority, but the committee can recommend what it wants to. It has our input. And yeah.
Robin, I think your hand is up.
Yeah, that's a really interesting option, David, to go back and talk about oversight and the things that are expensive in oversight. Because I've been thinking a lot about oversight with this for a while and thinking about the agencies that use these types of individuals. These agencies are heavily regulated primarily by the OHA, some by ODE, and they're not independent practice settings. So, for instance, after the initial period where somebody is under supervision before they're licensed, knowing who the specific supervisor is, I think is very important for the board. But at the point at which someone has a license, I think it's more important for the oversight to be the responsibility of the agency. So perhaps having the licensee report off their employer as opposed to report off their direct supervisor would be a better way to go. I know for many, I know like at CAPU, for instance, people can have several different people who would be providing supervision. That would be confusing. But as an agency, we have a responsibility and a legal requirement that OHA enforces and that, frankly, for us, CMS enforces that says, thou shalt have this type of supervision. So I'm wondering if there's ways that we can look at lowering the touches that have to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that would be one way to do it. So, Laura, and I see Kate, hands are still up there.
Go ahead,
I
Laura.
just want to follow up on what Robin said, because I also represent Trillium Family Services. They're a children's residential provider, and they have been fully supportive of this concept and will probably employ many of these people. And I think that route would make way more sense for them because, as Robin said, they have more child psychiatrists at Trillium than they have anywhere else in the state. So they're going to have multiple people supervising, and having it be the responsibility of the employer then I think makes sense. And then if there is a complaint, the board can go and then talk to the powers that be at Trillium and say, okay, we need to come in here and figure out who's supervising and do it from there.
Yeah,
Kate?
I think from my perspective, that structure makes a lot of sense. And I'll just remind folks, like this doesn't completely mitigate, because I think one of the main concerns, around regulating this new provider type will be around ensuring supervision. However, we talked a lot in our last meeting about, folks who sit on these boards and see the kinds of complaints that come in. And it's not exclusively, but often I think in my experience, what you see is that independent practitioners, right? So psychologists, LPCs, when folks have the autonomy to practice independently, start a private practice, not have a sort of oversight of an agency, you see a lot of complaints coming through with providers who are working in that way. That is not an option for this provider type. They can't even bill, and there's some constraints that have been built in to the structures that surround this, like through CMS, how OHA is going to approve billing, and the Oregon Health Plan that constrain what these folks can do. They can't bill without having a supervisor at an agency, right? For example, there'd be no way for them to provide services without billing up through a supervisor. Now, of course, that doesn't solve every problem, but there are some additional constraints that are placed on these providers that aren't true for practitioners who can work independently and who can bill independently. And so that might be a way to think about not loosening oversight, but putting more of the responsibility onto the agencies that are employing these folks than MHRA and the Board of Psych, as Robin and Laura are suggesting, that might help to reduce the costs. I'll offer two other quick thoughts about reducing costs. One is that, I met with Loree and Todd this morning, and I think it's fine to share that the Ballmer Institute has raised some money that can cover the difference between the $200 and $600 fee for like the next 4 to 5 years. We can't do it indefinitely, but we can help get this off the ground in the short term, which provides some buffer to figure out a longer term solution. And the second is some of the other time intensive activities like course review is something I heard Loree say takes time. We have faculty who I think could volunteer to help take some of those tasks off the plate of the Board of Psych to, provide an initial review or provide some consultation without cost if it's ending up taking a lot of time to do things like reviewing courses for new programs and do they meet the requirements that we've outlined in these roles. So those are just a few suggestions, and I think we could come up with lots of other ways of thinking about how to offset costs to keep the fee a little bit more reasonable. Those are just a few off the top of my head as we're thinking this through.
Okay, Lori?
A couple of the things. One is just not wanting to minimize actually how often people who work within larger institutions actually get complaints about things that are really serious as well. I don't think that should be skated over. Just institutional oversight doesn't mean that there's less, in my experience. My question is if we're I heard two things. One, that there's the possibility that we could just like stop talking about this now and there's coverage and then we can figure out what the actual real fees need to be moving forward. And so maybe we don't need to spend this much time if the Ballmer Institute is going to be covering some of that. I like the creativity of maybe we can outsource some of the work if that needs to happen. But then my other question was like, if we were to do what Robin was talking about and switch to like listing a company instead of an individual supervisor, does that actually save money or is that just like moot?
Yeah, good question.
Well, and to
So
add to that, the board has no oversight over institutions or organizations or anything besides the individuals it regulates. The supervision contract is how we tap into oversight, some oversight over professionals outside of our scope of regulatory authority. So, I mean, they may have some more oversight, but like Lori was saying, that's not fail-proof, and we could talk to programs and that might help, with things like that, but it's not going to guarantee. And it comes down to the question, what is better? What is public protection here? That's our mandate. So
well, and I
just go
guess
back to that.
oh, sorry. I guess what you're saying too is that we don't have regulatory oversight over institutions,
Nope.
only over licensed individuals, as it
And
were.
also just a reminder that the statute didn't, give the board any authority like that. It didn't give it any general funds. It expects us to be covered through other funds. We did request assistance, last biennium for a new licensing system, and that got through our governor budget. The governor approved it, but the legislature said no. So we're not guaranteed to get funds in that way. I think they've already answered that question in the Senate Bill 1547. And there's no requirement that these folks this new license type practice within those places. They do have to have a supervisor, but there's no real practice restriction. So in theory, they could be outside. I don't think it's super likely if they want to bill Medicaid. but
Yeah. Laura?
So I guess when I was talking about this, I wasn't envisioning less oversight for the board. I was basically saying that they could attest that this is who they're working for, and then if there was like a complaint, then the board would go to the employer and say, okay, who was their supervisor, and then just take it from there. Is that not the way it works, Lori? I'm not familiar enough with the details of how that works once it's there, but that's how I was envisioning it. Then you could figure out who was supervising, because they need that supervisor's signature to bill, so you can track it back to who was supervising them at the time. So what am I missing here?
yeah, I'm not so sure that I know about the billing requirements and that a supervisor is needed to sign off on an independent license. That, I mean, it really isn't independent, but how in tune with the rules is every employer going to be, and they're going to make sure that that's upheld. We feel that requiring the supervision contract up front, which is a short, simple electronic signatures, that is signaling that the supervisor, like, okay, there's this set of rules that I need to abide by. There's these responsibilities I've actually agreed to. And up front, that little extra work is going to save us a lot of time on the back end trying to enforce people that don't follow the requirements. I mean, even with our registered associates, it's pretty common that folks are practicing without the supervision they're supposed to have, and they have a pretty long, detailed contract.
So for the sake of our progress here, let me propose one of two things. We could, and by the way, this is all going to go to the Board of Psychology, and they're going to have to figure out how this is going to happen. We can propose, this is what we suggest, but we could do one of two things. We could leave the fees kind of as they originally requested, with the notion that there might be some funding that Kate has been able to track down that can help us get the ball rolling. We can get going. Or option two is that we could put in this document lower fees, give it to the Board of Psychology, and they can look at it and say, they can see if they can figure out a way to make it work, or they would just say, no, we're going to have to go with this other one. But it ultimately is the decision of that board. So do you have a preference? Should we leave it as it is, or do we want to put lower fees in and let the board figure it out?
Personally, I say leave it and we can figure out what the real fees are and adjust accordingly. But that's my
Okay.
2 cents.
Okay, Robin?
I think Laura was up before me.
Okay, Laura, go ahead.
So I guess my suggestion, and because of what I stated before, NAMI really wanting this to expand to other professions, I would say let's set a fee, because that buys us time to go and figure out our options legislatively. So if it buys us time to talk to the governor's office and do the other stuff that we can, and be creative about this, because then, you know, it can go to the board, and the board can, I don't know when the board's going to make decisions on this, Lori, when is that?
September meeting.
September.
September meeting. Okay. So it gives us a month and a half maybe to go and see.
Well, the
if-
last meeting of this committee is, what was it, August 7th? I think it's 3 weeks. So
Yeah.
I need to know what, like, by that point, we need to have, I envision this committee taking a vote, whether it's on individual pieces or whole package, and saying this is what we want to present to the full board. I have to create a memo with like sort of a discussion of the points where things were kind of sticky, and the proposed rule package. So before
my-
that next meeting,
My suggestion is we set the fee that we think is appropriate and send that to the board. And then that buys us a month between now and the time that the board would take a vote on it, to see if there are some ways that we can figure out what to do to make up the difference.
Okay, and
As a
Kate?
body, then we'd be saying, this is what we prefer.
Okay. Kate?
I agree with Laura.
Okay. So am I hearing that we,
And Robin's
And
got her hand
I
up
would
as
agree.
well.
Sorry. I would agree. We need to set a fee. I can't vote on a fee of $600 every 2 years. I think that's unreasonable.
okay. So what would be a reasonable number that, again, we'll send it to the psychology board and they will ultimately decide whether that's workable or not. Kate's throwing 200 out there. Would you say that's for application and the biennial renewal?
I mean, I think maybe a higher fee for the license application people could absorb if the renewal is set to 200. So if it costs 325, to apply, but then it's $200 after that, I think that, could be reasonable.
Can I get everyone to agree on the idea that for application that we keep it at 325? Are people okay with that? Okay, I see at least some thumbs up there. And then I see another some thumbs up. Awesome. They're all over the place now. And then, so I think we could put in on B there, 325 for that licensed behavioral health practitioner. Good. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, doing for both of those. And then for biennial license renew, people are talking about $200. I'm fine putting that number in if that sounds okay to people. I see thumbs up. Again, the board will do what they can with that. And then there's a different fee for inactive license. That's $90. Are people okay with that biannually?
That's just psychology. We're not doing an inactive
Oh, we're not going to do an
psychologist
active one for
license.
that. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's 3 statuses for psychologists and psychologist associates,
Okay.
which are the master's level folks.
Okay.
And then the last part's down here at the delinquent fee is 210 for a psychologist or psychologist associate.
Are people okay with 100 for a delinquent fee? Again, it's less. And again, we'll see how this fits with the board, and Kate, we might circle back with you about the funds that you have and about how this might help us and what we ultimately need to do. So,
Yeah, I'd be happy to come talk to the board if that'd be helpful, and or you and I
okay.
could meet and I could share with you in advance just so you have the
Okay.
information before that meeting, whatever would be most helpful.
Okay. Well, the ink is still wet. Let's keep moving, Larry.
Eddie had his
Oh,
hand
Eddie, sorry. Go ahead.
No problem. I think for clarification, the fees that we are potentially coming up with right now will be presented to the board, and then ultimately they can decide yes or no. Like
Yes.
we're not, they don't care like what we've decided. Like that's a possibility.
Yeah, I will tell you though that
Okay.
the board's sentiment is very similar to this group's. I mean,
Okay.
in the meeting on July, they all had the same reaction, but
Okay.
they also recognized the cost. So I think that they realize that it's a tricky situation, but
Okay.
ultimately they're going to have to figure out how to pay for all this because
Yeah.
gas is $4 a gallon and we're only going to charge $2 to somebody. We got to make that up
Mhm.
somewhere, somehow.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's the issue.
Okay.
So
Cool.
yes.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, no problem. Okay.
So I think our next main area, I guess maybe can we maybe is there any updates, Kate, on the exam?
Yes, we are have 3 companies that have applied through the procurement process we have to go through at the U of O to, engage vendors. We have meetings set up with them in the next couple over the next couple weeks. And so we should have a vendor identified shortly. The sort of full length of time all of them are proposing is about a year, maybe 10 months, depending on which vendor it is, till it's like ready to go live. And so it should be next summer that we have the competency exam sort of ready to be implemented.
Okay, so we wouldn't be able to license anybody till the summer then, because if this goes in with the exam plugged in, then we would have to wait for that.
Yeah, I think that was a question for this group actually, because you had suggested at one point that folks could like, I don't know, apply and get some kind of provisional license until the, or I don't know, status until the exam is ready, or not. But yeah, that will be the rate limiting step is how quickly these vendors can get the test actually implemented. They all are proposing very similar timelines, and so once we have those meetings and have identified the final vendor, we may be able to work with them to get it done a bit more quickly. So I can keep you posted once we have the final vendor selected.
Okay. I mean, the option, because the statute gives the board pretty broad authority to, require exams, that's an option to either not do it at first, which I don't know how the group feels about that, or just wait until it's ready and do it then. But there's no allowance to do any sort of provisional license. That's just not something we can
Right.
do.
Yeah, we can either just say, come on in, we're going to give you your license without having to take an exam, or we just have them wait. Robin?
Can we have them take their exam at renewal and make that a requirement at renewal?
That introduces some procedural challenges because what are we going to do if they don't pass? Take their license away? There's some process kind of stuff we would have to go through to remove a license.
But there's process stuff we'd have to go through to remove a license anyway. I mean that's if they don't pay their dues, you're gonna have to remove a license. They just don't get a renewed license.
True, but an exam is a pretty big contingency for renewal, and I could see folks if they don't pass it and their license is going to get taken away, going to the governor's office. Like it could become somebody who's been practicing and has a client load already, rather than withholding it up front. It's a lot more simple to say you're not going to get your license in the first place than to take it away later.
But we're talking about the first wave of people, the people who just graduated.
Mhm.
Right.
So we're talking how many people, Kate?
17.
Not a lot of people. I mean, their other option is to just not go for their license for the first time. I'm just trying to find a way to get some of this workforce comfortable and out there.
Right. Well, it would be a matter of 6 months. I don't know the timing exactly, Kate, but theoretically next summer we'd have the license. So
And talk about driving costs up. If we try to take a license from somebody who can't pass an exam, that triggers their right to a hearing, and those costs start accruing. Then we get our counsel involved. It becomes a bigger deal. I'd rather just see no exam up front versus having it be a condition of renewal.
yeah, that would be speaking as the chair of the board, I think I would prefer that. Just either we say you don't have to take an exam the first group through. Once there's an exam, then that becomes a requirement that we have as a board.
So I was just thinking that like, what if there's just a different version of the exam, right? It's not maybe the thing that's put together by the professional company or whatever, but there is a smaller, easier version that this first group takes.
We could build that for sure. I mean, based on they're all from our program, right? So we could easily have our faculty create a set of questions from each required course that students took that are part of the scope of practice to get these first 17 through, and that could be the initial exam the board approves, and with obviously the goal of getting the vendor who will maintain the item bank and update it and do all that administration and so on moving forward for future cohorts.
Laurie, can I ask if we did something like that, would we need to specify in the competency exam here the board prescribes the whatever test until this one is done, or how would we do that?
I think it would just be simple as, if it's named the, I don't know, licensed behavioral health wellness practitioner competency exam, something just generic, and that exam itself changes. Like the same thing with
okay.
the EPPP. They expanding it the way they wanted to with the part 2 was different, but this would be the same exam that just
Yeah,
is maybe administered in a different way. And, ASPB can change exam vendors without necessarily us having to change our rules.
that's true. Well, I like the idea of just putting the exam name, what you just described, just list the exam for this particular discipline. And assuming that the vendor's test or exam does not show up till next summer, which is probably as early as it would happen, we have an alternative one that the board approves
An
and
earlier version of it.
an
That's
earlier
just,
version. Yeah,
yeah.
whatever. Okay.
That seems safer to me. Like at least there's some exam,
Yeah.
there's not no exam, and we're not adding this
Yeah.
procedural
Yeah.
complexity that,
Yeah. Let's get people, cleared and through the hoops before they start. Let's not make them jump through another one after. Just it gets messy. So, okay, great.
So like, yeah, I'll just leave this placeholder in there and then whatever the exam name comes in, we can hopefully plug it in
Okay,
at some point.
good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, so supervision contract time. So I basically drafted a couple options. Option one would be just, we have the supervisor's responsibilities clearly laid out. I just kind of rearranged a few little things in there to make it a little bit simpler on them. And I wrote down what changes in a little bullet here, and the licensee's responsibilities, which option two obviously scales that way back because I don't see how we can have somebody not sign up front onto their responsibilities, but we hold them to it if, and this does have some challenges in here because, there's this supervisory relationship where are we really going to expect the supervisor to hold the licensee responsible and tell them to do certain things? It just the relationship. So, I mean, it's just in your packets is a draft contract that shows how simple the contract can be. There'd be fields in there for digital signatures. It's a one-pager. It just says, I agree to do the supervision up front. Then the supervisor knows what they're signing up for. There's no confusion about that. Yeah, and then they just submit it through the licensee portal. I think that the work up front for that, while it may be seen as somewhat of a burden, I'm hoping that in a future licensing system, we can make it even easier, have something where they sign up for it, and then it's like the system sends it to the supervisor for approval rather than having this form. That's for a future licensing system, which we're also working on. But for now, I think this could help prevent a lot of work when people think that these are just licensed practitioners. They kind of forget, or like the supervision requirements kind of go to the wayside, and we start catching stuff on the back end and having to do a lot more compliance side work to make up for shortfalls and like hold the licensees responsible for this. And I think it just would be more costly in the long run having to enforce this.
This is
after.
option two, you say would be more costly?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless we really just stripped out the supervision requirements, which it's in the statute, but I mean, having to enforce it. I mean, we see these problems with, the registered associates, for example, already, and they have like I said, they have a pretty detailed contract. So this is still our recommendation that we keep option one and the short form.
Thoughts on this?
I think if there's a way that it could happen that's really automated, right? Where it's like, the licensee, says their agency, their supervisor's email, it goes to the supervisor. They can sort of read, here's the qualifications. I attest, I meet those. Yes, I am this person's supervisor. That kind of system seems more reasonable, and it sounds like that would be the goal than sort of what we discussed last time of like physical signatures and scanning and things that just are going to create more burden for folks. And I understand why doing it on the front end, is going to probably be less cost and better oversight than trying to do it retrospectively. So I'm curious what others think if this could be done in a way that's pretty automated.
And just a side note, we did, we've had some demos from vendors, so we've seen what this could look like with a better system. It's just that we don't have that yet. It's the RFP is out there for new licensing systems on the statewide procurement, so we're gonna have some options soon. Then we have to, it's a placeholder in our budget to fund the licensing system, but we're probably not gonna have it for another year or so, depending on how long the procurement process takes. And it's
Right.
never as quick as you think it's gonna be, so. But that said, we are working on it, so hopefully that will be an option sooner than later.
Any people have a particular preference for one or two, these options? So I think I heard somebody, oh, go ahead, Eddie.
I mean, I feel like one is where I would lean. I know I hear I was thinking back to our last meeting with concerns of like supervisors like leaving and that kind of thing, especially in like these types of settings. And I know this is just my singular experience, but like working in community mental health where like turnover was kind of the expectation. Like I never really had to worry about having to track down someone to like my supervisor never left in that time, and I was there for 3.5, 4 years. So I think I feel like option one is kind of our best bet, like just for safety of everybody. And looking at the our packet, Lori, and looking at the form that you've provided, I mean, it's pretty simple. Like it's pretty quick and easy, and I don't feel like that's asking too much of our supervisor or our licensees to have to follow. I just feel like there's like a certain level of expectation, like as a licensee, like I just don't think that's asking too much.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. Robin?
I think where I get hung up is that this is for the rest of their lives. And they're signing up for having to have this supervision contract for the rest of their lives. That feels, I wonder if there's a happy medium in the middle. Perhaps if you've been licensed with no incident for 5 years, then it defaults to the agency that has to keep that. And I understand the board doesn't have that relationship that the agency has to their licensure. But as somebody who would work with and employ some of these individuals, I am not going to give up, I'm not going to violate my own license for, to protect somebody who's breaking those rules. It just, I don't think Trillium would either. But I wonder if there's any way to consider a period of time post licensure after which the onerousness of this becomes less.
Yeah, it's a good question. In some ways, if I'm working at Trillium or somewhere else and I like my job and I'm there for a long time, theoretically, I don't have anything to do because I've got my contract. So if I get a new supervisor or I change jobs, I would do that. As a board, I like the idea of knowing, I don't care if you work for 5 years or 20 years, I'd like to know who is your supervisor. Just simplifies things. And maybe we can just make sure that the process isn't that demanding. But anyway, I guess that's my thoughts.
So
Eddie, go ahead. Oh, Lori?
No, Laura, you're good. I can wait.
I was just saying Eddie, you were naming this a minute ago. It's really not that demanding of a process to throw an electronic signature on something and upload it. To be honest, and I don't know. I feel like this feels like it doesn't seem like that big of a deal to me, and maybe I'm missing something, but it just yeah.
Okay. Eddie?
Yeah, I think Robin, to your point of like this is like a rest of their life kind of agreement that these licensees would have. Like I totally hear that, and I think going into this rack and like from my understanding of like the new licensure and then the program when it was being like instituted, I've kind of always, and Kate, please feel free to correct me. I've kind of gotten the sense from like interviews that I've heard or like articles that I've read that students going into these programs with the idea to get this license, like that's kind of part of it. Like they understand like it's for the rest of their time. Like this is these are just what I have to do, like at this level of licensure. And so I hear that part, Robin, but I just feel like that's kind of the agreement that's signed up for, like as pursuing this license and like this route, like that's just what's agreed upon. And if there's not a desire to do that anymore, there's like some options after that, right, with different like education afterwards. But I guess that's just but I hear you. I mean, I think it's hard to a 23, 24-year-old graduating school. I have to do this now until I,
Forever.
in an ideal world, retire, right? Until I'm done. That doesn't sound great. But also it kind of feels like that's what's being agreed upon in pursuing this kind of like licensure in the way that it stands right now.
Laurie, can I ask if we went with option one, for example, and 2 or 3 years from now, we're getting feedback that this is becoming a little too onerous for people because they're moving around a lot. Is this something that we as a board could revisit?
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. I mean, just like any other rules, the board could
Okay.
review whether how well it's working, if there's alternatives. Presumably in a few years when we have the new licensing system, we can hopefully it's even less burdensome but yeah, I mean, the legislature made this a supervised license. That's in the statute. So I mean, even the idea of like not requiring it after a certain period of time, then that still means like more rules and more layers of requirements. So that, yeah.
So I see Kate and Laura. I don't know whose hand went up first.
I guess I just I'm more concerned about the burden and the cost on the board at this point than I am concerned about the burden on the licensee to provide that. So I guess my question to you, Larry, is which one of these options is less onerous on the board, and how much is the supervision piece really driving your costs that you're applying right now?
I mean, the supervision is required, and we've done some discussions internally about this, what we've seen with the other two boards, how their registered associates and residents behave. We really believe that just having a simple contract up front makes everybody's responsibilities clear, and I feel like it's going to reduce our compliance load in the long run because people are just going to follow the requirements. We're not going to have to worry about the supervisor saying they didn't know what they signed up for and people trying to, our regulatory scope is the licensee and, our, licensee base.
Right. Kate and then Todd.
Yeah, I think that what you're describing I makes sense to me. And particularly if there's sort of a commitment to making this as low burden as possible. Like a couple things that flag for me are just things for us to consider. Does 14 days, I don't know, 30 days seems like maybe that might be more reasonable, to give people time to sort this out, like your supervisor's on vacation, I don't know, or somebody like isn't there to sign the form. And like, what about the situation that I think Laura and Robin both raised, where folks have like multiple supervisors in an agency? Would you create a form that, allows people to identify multiple people who are their supervisors? Like what? Anyway, I think there are just some complexities to think through, but if there is a commitment from, the board and MHRA to try to make this really seamless, and in a way that's going to reduce costs that contribute to the amount of fees that need to be charged for these folks, I think I think this could work as a first step, and we can see how it's working in reality. If it ends up being too burdensome or a challenge, it could be reevaluated.
Todd.
Yeah, real quick, just based on some of the conversations, I think last time when we were talking fees, I heard folks say, listen, we testified to the legislature that the costs were going to be, lower. This is what we briefed. I think on this subject, and I don't mean to speak for Kate, her memory is probably better than me. I do know the testimony did say these folks will be supervised at their place of employment. And I believe there were follow-up questions, which then were answered. Yes, they will be supervised. So I want to keep that in mind. Then on the issue, honestly, in full transparency, I kind of don't care where y'all go with supervision, but I want the front end to match the back end. So if you tell me we don't really want anything signed up front, we're just going to rely on the agency, we're going to rely on this. My question would be then what you expect the board to do on the backside? I can tell you stepping into some place where for 3 years there's been turnover, people really, there's been somebody signing off for billing, but it doesn't take long for somebody to go, nobody reminded me of this. I just found out I was signing off on billing. The board's not going to be able to bring together a prosecutable case after spending a lot of investigatory time. So I think that's my point. The front just has to match the back. If we don't want to, do much on the front, and then we still want to try to prosecute it, that's where you're going to drive up costs for the board. We're going to spend a lot of time on something that we actually, and if the public is harmed, how do you go back over 2 or 3 years and make it right to the public? You don't.
Right.
That's all I.
It feels like there's some momentum towards option one here with the one caveat. Kate, you mentioned like the days perhaps on that point H there that's highlighted, maybe making that a 30 days, which is fine.
Let's just give a little bit more leeway if, yeah, I don't know. A little more room for getting things taken care of. Not everybody's great with their email. Like supervisors aren't always checking, email and responding as quickly as we might hope. Just provides a little bit more flexibility. And I think if there's any way to signal just that this is, through an electronic system or something that makes this as simple as possible, or just there's an understanding that that's the goal, it seems reasonable to me.
That's fine. And if the board has heartburn with 30 days, we'll adjust. But I think we can suggest that and we can go from there. Are
So
people
then
okay with us?
Below, I have it under this is the supervisor responsibilities. Then under the licensee responsibilities, I have 14 days for that and a few other things. Are we changing that to 30 days also for all those things?
Days of. So I don't know if I want to wait a month for them to let me know that they've terminated supervision. That seems like a long time. I don't know. I feel like 14 days is probably okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Changing that seems,
Case
like
employment, all of that. Yeah.
So then we have this not consistent. Would we want to parse this out, the investigation piece, and make that 14 or 30 days?
I guess so, if it would be consistent with what we did up above.
I mean, they might not even know about that. The licensee wouldn't we want that to be the supervisor's responsibility? If that's about the supervisor's license?
Well, it says either or, so it's basically about what you know. Like I wouldn't expect the licensee to necessarily know about a pending, investigation against their supervisor unless they're the one that filed it. I mean, and we could just take it out from here, make it completely the responsibility of the supervisor.
I mean, that seems like, to me at least, more practically the responsibility of the supervisor. You could imagine plenty of supervisees not knowing that their supervisor was being investigated for some reason.
Or we could let the supervisor out and just make it so they need to report their own.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And perhaps the language in B could just be a new employment or practice location, right? Like they don't necessarily need to say like they stopped working at place A. What we need to know is they started working at place B, right? Just reporting any new employment where they're going to be providing services. Seems like what you really want to know, right? Not requiring people to say, oh, I left this job and now I have a new job is a separate report. Because a change would signal both of those things.
I see.
So the way our system is for like registered associates is it has like a start date and an end date. So you would put an end date on your past employment and then like a start date on the new one. So that's why I left that language sort of open, like it's a change. So we'd want to know like when you weren't practicing at whatever site anymore. So then, client records or whatever would not pertain to that site anymore. It could become relevant, but that's sort of why I left that more open.
Okay. People okay with this plan? Okay, I'm going to keep us moving. Larry, why don't we proceed?
Okay, so is there anything else we want to talk about in this particular option 1 text? So I added number 8, that's new.
Okay.
That's why it's highlighted. That was
Yeah.
a suggestion from council.
Okay. I listen to council.
Yep.
Reasonable.
Okay.
Okay. We're just gonna say bye to that.
Okay.
License renewal. I think we've already gone through this. This is pretty standard and like the other board. So did anybody want to talk about renewal? Just the process.
I think it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah. We don't name fees here because they're in the fee schedule, obviously. 30-day grace period, same as licensees or psychologists, I mean. Client records. So this part, I left a placeholder here. Nevada doesn't talk about the records. I don't know if we need them because like we've talked about, it's an agency setting generally here. And I don't know how much a license type like this would be individually responsible for client records.
So just so I'm clear that we're talking about rules about how long you have to keep records, maintain that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like the psychology rules talk about the 7-year retention period, the qualified person designation, aka custodian of record, for if something happens to them and death or incapacitation, somebody to take over for their records. Talks about what the minimum contents of a client file. So that kind of stuff. I left it blank because I can't think that this would be relevant. I don't have something to go off from Nevada. So I wanted the committee to even let me know if this is even something I should jump into or if this should just be deleted for now. And then maybe down the road, if we find this is like an issue, add something.
Robin?
I'm trying really hard to think of a scenario where they would keep an individual record.
Yeah.
And I would rely on Kate's expertise, but I don't see in my mind a place where they would keep an individual record.
Yeah, one that they would own, like their
Right. If they're in
doc.
primary care, they're charting in the patient's chart. If they're in inpatient or residential, they're charting in the patient's chart. If they're in a school setting, they're charting in the patient's, I mean, in the individual's school record. I don't see where they would have an individual record.
I mean, but I always go back to, we have this vision of what this license is going to be doing and where they're going to be in their settings, but the statute does not limit them to specific settings. So that's why I wanted to make sure we covered this. So we're anticipating unintended consequences. But like I said, this is not closed off. Once this rule making happens, if this becomes relevant, the board could implement more rules later.
Yeah, for me, client records kind of implies independent practice, which isn't really happening here. But Vicky and then Robin again.
I'm wondering about language that says something along the lines of the person, the licensee, will complete records timely per the policies and procedures of the agency that they're working for, that gives them their oversight or that they're employed by. So it makes them, so it is part of their license that they're responsible to do their records timely. Because whatever the notes are, whatever the documentation is, we have to be responsible to turn in, that they will do it timely and do it according to their, because every place is going to be different and everything you're doing is a little different.
Right.
But it does put a little, a little bit of responsibility on the licensee to do it.
Right.
And I wonder if the code of ethics sort of covers that.
It does.
Yeah. Yeah. This
Yeah.
is almost having more to do with kind of the logistics of the records themselves. Kate, did you have a thought?
I was going to say something almost identical to what Vicky just suggested, that we keep it simple here and, simply point out, timely documentation consistent with their, the requirements of their employer. But per Robin, right, these folks are not able to practice independently. Their records are always going to be part of a larger system that someone else is signing off on. So I think, unlike psychologists or other independent practitioners, we probably don't need to go into the length of the depth here that that is there for other practitioners.
Yeah. And psychologists, by the way, we don't have anything written in here that says you need to do your records in a timely way because that's part of ethics. And so that's our point here is that do we need this at all? Because it's already covered essentially in the ethics. This is more about how do we maintain records, et cetera. Robin?
I'm agreeing with you, David. I don't know that we need this in here at all because I think it also insinuates that there's a need for a record. And what I hate is
Okay.
for us to insinuate that there's the need for a record.
Yeah. I really think that everything that's been said about timeless and all, absolutely we need to do, and I think that's addressed. And this is a whole different thing related to just, managing the records that you have. And I just don't think we need it for this group.
Yeah, and I think the code of ethics ties it back to the client. I'd be a little bit cautious to tie it to an organization's requirements because that puts the board in a position of trying to, enforce an agency's requirements, So I would say leaving it more like client care kind of level like the ethics code does is appropriate.
Yeah. Okay.
Same way we don't want to get
Be a
into like
situation
HR stuff or,
where an employer is going to reach out to the board and say, my employee isn't completing their records in a timely fashion. Please, yeah, there's
discipline them.
like that wouldn't be a pathway.
Hopefully not.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Cool. So are we ready to jump to the code?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I don't have it open. Give me a sec. Clicking on stop share and it wouldn't stop. Okay.
Got it.
Okay, so this basically I took the draft from Kate and team and reorganized it into a rule layout, added a few things to make it like enforceable and just fitting in with the rules and in a little bit of a different order. The highlighted stuff is new. So that's stuff that was not in their draft. And the stuff that has some track changes applied to it are things that I changed from that draft code. Our legal counsel has looked at this and made some suggestions around making it more enforceable, since she's got a lot of experience enforcing the codes. So, so we can just start from, start from the top.
Yep. Do you want us to just kind of read through each thing and say, does anyone have any questions about point A or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like, so the first part, general purpose and scope, it just talks about who it applies to, licensees and applicants. We're calling them practitioners instead of being like LBH, WP all over. Some of it's going to apply to applicants, not all of it, but yeah, and then the violations of the code, what that means. Lack of awareness is not a defense in and of itself. Any concerns about section 1?
Not for me.
Okay. And then code construction, yeah, so this ties it back to sort of how the code is interpreted in a manner that maximizes client protection, safety, and well-being. I think that's important.
The board. Okay.
Any questions, concerns? Okay, so then preamble. This, like I said, it's in somewhat of a different order, but it's all the same content essentially, except for we're calling them practitioners. This one says licensees and specifically because applicants don't yet have a bachelor's degree, so that's why that difference is there.
Okay.
And then ethical principles. Just some minor changes there.
Just for context, folks, these are, if folks don't have time to read this in detail, these are straight from the Psychology Code of Ethics, and it, notes that specifically, and the language has changed a little bit to reflect, differences in scope and so on. But these sort of ethical principles were intentionally tied to psychology, given that at least in both states that have, started the work of licensing these folks, the Board of Psych is the body that will be overseeing implementation. It felt like tying the principles to psychology's code of ethics made good sense.
Good.
Tried and true, and it's very similar to the ACA code. Okay, so then ethical standards. So these are the enforceable components. Mostly just some kind of corrections, then adding references to the other rules.
Okay.
Okay.
And all the blue additions are those things that legal counsel kind of made sure we added?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, she's seen all these changes.
You'll see her
Well,
fingerprints on all of this.
most of this came from her. She also reviewed changes I made, and so this is all reviewed.
Yeah. It's all good.
Yep.
It all looks very sensible, and I will say that drafting an ethics code from scratch was new to the team that worked on it.
Totally.
It's around enforceability is very helpful.
And I think this is probably one of the most substantive changes being suggested here. We kind of throw around dual relationship, multiple relationship. The thought here is to just keep one term so that it's consistent.
Okay.
And define multiple relationship within here.
Yeah,
That helps.
that change looks really good to me.
Okay. And then the recommendation, instead of a, forever period, definitely can't have a relationship, maybe going with a 5-year.
So say that again.
So the way the draft was that you couldn't have like a multiple, like another relationship. You had to wait for, you couldn't ever. So
Never.
this would put in 5 years. We think that this seems more defensible.
So 5 years after I have a relationship with somebody, I could go into business with them and open a food truck, whatever.
Yep. Or marry them.
Okay.
Well, marrying you presumably would have been dating. So just entering into that relationship 5
Okay.
years ago.
Gotcha. 5 years. Yeah, I think actually that's better to get, so it's not forever.
Okay.
Makes sense to me as well.
Yeah, and we include reference to the family members, the parent legal guardian, because that sometimes comes up and becomes an issue, and especially since these guys are going to be working with children. So we thought that was very important to add to that. Here we took out minor just because it could be an incapacitated adult too. I don't want to limit that.
Okay.
So this is where both Rachel and I were a little bit confused. Screeners, is that a noun? Is that an assessment tool? We weren't sure what screeners meant. So I think the intent would be screenings.
Or screening tools?
Yeah,
Is a
screening.
screener a person or is a screener a screening tool, like
Screening
assessment?
tool, I think.
Yeah,
Screening.
I don't know.
Are you okay with screening tool, folks? Would that be, or tools?
Yeah, that's a more accurate term. And the intent, that's what the intent of that language.
Screenings.
Screening tools, yeah.
Okay. So then there's two places that was fixed.
Okay.
More of adding family members, just kind of, so organizational seemed like it would make more sense and consistent where it calls things organizational in other parts of the code. Just clarifying that it's, you're creating records too. And here it talks about, there's our records piece, organizational policy. And then we tie it back to the client.
Good.
Yeah, I might just get rid of in treatment, given that some of these services many of the services might not be considered treatment that these folks are delivering. So I would just take out those last two words.
Yeah, client process or progress, yeah, period.
Yeah, I think it originally said diagnosis or something else, and we can take out treatment. That
Perfect.
does sound kind of
Yeah.
clinical. Okay. Here I thought it would be better instead of just like to refer to the specific requirements for supervision. This comes up as an issue, documenting, when you do consult about something. So we wanted to make that clear there. Just clarifying some of the documentation things. There's another one.
Okay.
Now we're at the end.
Okay.
Everything look okay?
Yeah,
Great.
thanks.
Wow. We made it through that one in record time. Great.
I'm curious if anyone has read, it would be helpful, I think, for folks to read this carefully. This took quite a lot of time, and I'm happy to talk more about the process, but we looked at the codes for all existing behavioral health professions, pulled out the common elements, updated things to be aligned with the scope of practice here. And all of the edits look good to me from MHRA, but I am curious if other folks have had time to review this in detail, and if not, maybe before the last meeting, just to see if there's, any glaring omissions or things that people feel like should be reflected in the ethics code here that are not. I realize that reading ethics codes is not the most stimulating nighttime reading, although if you're trying to fall asleep, you might pull it out. But if folks have time to review, I think we'd, just obviously the Board of Psych will, I'm sure, take a close look since they'll be overseeing. But super, super interested to hear any thoughts folks have about elements of this code aside from the very sensible revisions that have been added here.
I
So
think
is
the
this
hardest
something?
piece is what you might have, what's missing. Like you can see what's here, but like what's missing. But then the fact that you're relying on the established codes that have been developed over the past, however many years, many, many years. I think that helps us feel comfortable that most things are covered.
And could we just ask Larry to send this out with the notes, what we've been doing on that other part, before the next meeting, and then people can have a look at it. That would be great.
Yeah, we only made one little change to the draft. So, but yeah, I will send that out
Okay.
again for the final. Oh, I'm going to combine everything together. Right now, we have them kind of in separate documents because we've been working
Okay.
on them kind of piecemeal,
Yeah.
but I'll combine them.
Okay.
So I think the next place to go is the CE.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Just going to share it to the new version in case we have any changes. Okay, so definitions. I can't remember. Have we started talking about this? This has been through the Education DEI Committee of the Board of Psychology, and Lori will actually be familiar with some of this because we did a lot of work to align this between the two boards in that committee. So that board is proposing some rule changes that are very similar to this right now. So
Is this in the document? Sorry, I just scrolled through past the ethics code and I didn't see it, but maybe it's earlier in the PDF somewhere.
are you able to see the bookmarks page panel
Yeah.
on the left? So Division 50 CE, if you click that, it brings you down to page 30.
Oh, yeah. Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so this just adds this does a lot of improvements just to the entire set of rules. So adding more definitions, clarifying what we need, how things are counted. So we can talk about this individually, but the main focus for this committee is going to be here. What are the requirements for the new license type?
Okay. So is Nevada's 20 hours, is that an annual?
So so we are defining a CE reporting period is the same as their renewal period, which is a 2-year period.
Okay. So that would be 20 hours over 2 years.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
so Nevada, I just threw that up there as a reference. That's what Nevada is going to require for their renewal period is going to be a 3-year.
Okay.
I have a super naive question. What kind of CEs exist for these practitioners? Like, is 20 a reasonable number if we're creating something new here?
I mean, it's a good question. In my mind, if I'm working at Trillium with this license and there's some CE for social workers or psychologists, I assume I could sit in on that and it would count. I think I'd be taking a lot of similar CE to my colleagues, but Robin?
Organizations like Oregon Council on Behavioral Health, OCBH, I think that's what Heather Jeffress organizations stands for, do a lot of free trainings for bachelor's and master's level people working in residential settings that are fairly tailored to that environment, and they're usually low barrier and not like the spendy things that we have to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's going to be enough training. My question is just what's the number? Is 20 for over 2 years, 10 a year, is that reasonable? Like roughly one a month?
I think that is, especially since they're probably getting certain kinds of training in-house too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good point.
I think 20 is very sensible.
Okay. I like that too. People okay with 20 hours for the two-year period for them? Okay, good.
And also, just like, when the legislature creates new CE categories, the suicide risk, the pain management, kind of the supply or demand creates supply. So I feel like we'll see more trainings once we get more of these license types. The market will respond as well.
Okay, so how many of those 20 hours do we want to have as ethics hours?
20.
20? Why not?
I'm just kidding.
Uh, so I'm just doing math in my head. I think for psychology of my 40 hours, 4 needs to be that. So we could do 2.
Counselors at 6. So
Oh, is it? Okay. So do we keep it at 4?
I
I
say
don't know.
keep it at 4.
I like
4?
4.
4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes
4
sense.
it is. What about cultural competence?
And just note that, so unlike the other professions which have some mandatory CE, like you have suicide risk, you have cultural competency, you have for psychology, the pain management, ethics is just open. Like for this particular license type, it's all open. So I threw in cultural competency because I assumed that you would want it, and you're not limited to what I put here. You can put other things. Throwing that out there.
I like cultural competence. I guess the question would be how much do we going to require of that one? And I say that, remember, we only got 20. I don't want to completely take up all of those with a required type, especially if they're in an area where they want to learn more about children or more about substance use or whatever they happen to be in. I want to make sure that they have space to take training in that too. So that
I'm
being,
hitting on 4 just because I think that it's no matter what the population is, you need to be culturally competent. But
okay,
that's my 2 cents.
The
okay,
requirement for the other license types that we regulate is all 2.
I was
yeah,
wanting to
2 out of
suggest
40.
2 as well.
2's okay.
2.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do 2. Now, the other question is, do we want to have any other required topic for this group? Like psychology has pain or suicide. Um, is there any other topic like that that we think would be valuable for this group?
I think suicide's never a bad idea.
That's
Same.
Okay.
2.
And I think you want 1 or 2? Is it 1 that we have to do, Larry, or 2?
2.
It's 2. 2. Okay. It's a good topic.
Nothing else comes to mind for me as far as categories outside of that.
Okay.
Just
Well,
flat,
again, we can just adjust.
8 of the 20 hours we've specified what they need to be in. Does that feel like the
Yeah,
right?
that's where I'm going. Like, so we're up at, 40% is, you have to take this stuff. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to just tell them everything they have to take. But I think ethics, yeah, I'm
Ethics
not,
is very reasonable. Do we want
yeah.
to use the others to be half of the other professions, given that they have half the amount of CEs?
Well, that's where I was going with the math before with the ethics. I wouldn't be opposed to an hour of supervision, just saying you got to take at least one, I mean, suicide course, an hour's worth during each cycle. I could live with that.
Okay, I told you the wrong thing. It's 4 cultural competency for psych.
Oh,
And
Yeah,
then
I mixed
yeah,
that
that's
up.
Yeah,
let's,
so why don't we do 2 for cultural competence and 1 for suicide? And then that
yeah,
gives
gives
13
us,
hours to
yeah,
at their
And I
discretion.
mean, we just sent out, like OHA will put out free trainings for the suicide risk. So that is something that they can do pretty easily because it's required for the other professions. And
I,
if they are to do more than the 1 that were to be required, then that would still count. They would chose something
yeah,
that they
yeah,
just
I
didn't.
think they could find 2 hours. I think what we're trying to get at is, do we want to give them more degrees of freedom with the extra 12 or 13 hours?
Well, look, and these are minimums, right? Like if they can
Yes.
go out and they can do 2 or 4 or whatever on any of these topics if they're, wanting to, but we need to set a minimum. So
Yeah. Okay. Are people okay with these minimums? We got 4 for ethics. We've got 2 for cultural competence. We've got 1 credit for suicide risk assessment. That seem okay? And they can get more, like you say, no problem. Okay. Thank you.
And the same sort of grace period is going to apply. So once you get licensed, up until your birth month, you have a free period where you don't have to do any CE, you don't have to pay for renewal. But then once you hit that first renewal, you're starting a CE cycle that's 24 months.
Okay.
That makes sense. That's the way all the other license types work right now. So
Are we
that just
doing it
mirrors
are we doing it on birthdays like we do with psychology?
birth month. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And like going back to like trying to keep the cost the lowest for this, the more that we align the processes with the other boards, the more I can just put that right into the system. Our developers don't have to create a bunch of new logic. So that just really helps.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, psychology. I'm just gonna go through this stuff real quick in case anybody wants me to stop, because this is the same way that applies to the other professions. So they'll be subject to the same random audits. We're just cleaning up the language here and making it more clean on what we're requiring with an audit. And I had to do some kind of rearranging of the rules to make them make sense to fit this other profession in. So they're all in the same division. They have their separate sort of rule sets in some places about the requirements.
Okay.
Okay, so now this is the rule specific to what is a qualifying program. So it very much mirrors psychology, but we just changed it to their role as a behavioral health and wellness practitioner. This qualified instructor is pretty much the same. Evidence of completion, the same. What is a qualifying program? So it's going to be the same live versus university courses versus workplace educational programs, home study, which for both professions, we're defining it when it comes to the reading programs, because we've seen the education DEI committees have talked about this. We've seen some inconsistencies in how the different, programs will apply the credits based on either APA or NBCC or whatever. So the boards are coming up with their official definitions in these. So yeah,
Okay.
and the stuff that I'm striking out below, this is just me repurposing this rule so that the flow it's like psychology requirements, behavioral health and wellness practitioner requirements. And then it goes down and I move this stuff to here and like repurpose this rule. Here's what does not count. Yoga, that sort of thing.
So can I ask the group real quick? I think the answer is no, but would it be possible that there are things that we didn't count for psychologists that we would count for a bachelor's level person? Are there things that they might, maybe what we want them to know yoga? Maybe the answer is no, but I don't know. What do you think?
I can move down to that rule.
I'm inclined to just leave it as it is, but I did want to throw that out there. Maybe they're a less expensive employee. Maybe we want them to lead Tai Chi classes for people. And so therefore it would make sense for them to take, I don't know.
I'm just looking at the list of excluded activities here, and I don't think any of these, I wouldn't advocate that we count
Okay.
any of the activities here as qualifying for CEs.
Okay. That's my feeling too, but want to throw it out there.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff we're adding because it's been in sort of our list of like on the website, the FAQs, you can't count these things. We're making it more formal here. We've seen a lot of like, my blog should count. I worked so hard on this blog, it's published. And we're like, no. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go back up to this. This is all the qualifying programs.
Right.
It includes the self-directed reading, and it's going to have these are going to have the same categorical limitations as psychology, essentially.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I had a question. I know that you listed, I saw for what counts as an hour of CE and it was 60 minutes. of training. There's a lot of trainings that are 50 minutes that some people do. Would that be a problem if somebody says, well, it actually wasn't 60 minutes? Can I count this?
I mean, I haven't seen that. Between the two boards, both of them do have a requirement that it be a full.
Full
The
60
other board
minutes.
refers to it as a clock hour, which means 60 minutes.
Okay.
So it's just more of a clarification.
Okay.
So yeah, I've separated this one into the limitations with for psychologists and psychologist associates, which basically these are all clarifications except for one piece where the records training is going to be limited, but to 4.
Okay.
But then this is the behavioral health and wellness practitioner. So it's kind of become an issue with the counselors board because the board proposed to implement a change similar to psychology where home study was limited, and it's been getting a lot of negative feedback around that. So that becomes relevant here. Do we want to limit home study, which is defined as like not asynchronous stuff? Like there's no live presenter. Like even if you're watching it on your screen, that can still be considered live, but a pre-recorded thing or something where you read it and then take a test, that is home study. Do we want to limit that?
So like I'm just thinking about some of the like I recently did something through CE for Less, which is like was my ethics CEs where it was a bunch of material to read and then you take an exam, like a knowledge test of whether, right? Is that what you mean? Is that how
That's
you're
home study.
Yeah. I mean, you got to take a test. I don't know. I mean, if we accept that for psychologists and for the LPC board, seems like we probably should here too.
Right, but the
Not
idea
much.
here is if we're gonna like limit that such that they have to have a certain amount be
Yes.
live. Yeah.
That seems reasonable to me. Yeah.
Yeah, so right now we have it so you can have 2 credits of the home study is I think the way it's written. Am I seeing that right?
So 10%. Yeah. That seems reasonable.
10 credits would be half.
Oh,
No
half.
more than 10. Okay, no more than half for home study. Okay. And self-directed reading would be no more than 2.
Because basically we used to just throw self-directed reading in with the home study, like this is home study. For this,
Okay.
I parse them out because there's a different way we document when somebody does self-directed reading. So I think it just makes the rules clear. So that's it's kind of the same thing. You can read
Okay.
for a certain amount or do your asynchronous C and you're capped at 10 for that. The other 10 has to be basically live.
Yeah, okay.
I like this too because of affordability too, because the live trainings
Yeah.
are usually more expensive. So, allowing like CE for less or something like that, we'll do some of that so that we can knock out some but our more intense trainings where we travel to or get online or whatever are usually at least double, if not more expensive. So this would be conscientious about how much we're requiring of them to spend for their continuing education as well.
Okay. I think and that ethics and other limitations, I don't know that we need any.
Yeah, so this says it's similar to psychology where psychology would limit to 4 credits out of the total 40 to be the self-directed reading. And then it says that only half of that can go towards ethics. So I don't know if we want to, you don't have to limit or do any like other kind of limitations. These are just the ones that I thought made the most sense.
I don't have a need to parse that out. I don't know how they feel, but
No, I don't think so. This seems
again, we'll see how this goes, 2 or 3 years from now if we feel like something needs to change, but I think this is decent.
Well, and if we were requiring 4 credits of ethics and they do 2 of those in the self-directed reading, they still have to get 2 in a different way. So
Yeah, well, right now we don't say that. Now we're saying they could get them all. But that's what Larry was saying. Do we want to say you can only get no more than 2 of your ethics hours this way?
But yeah, no, that's what we put in there. I mean, because
Yeah.
they could do 2 total, so they would still, that would force them to do
Oh,
the other 2 of ethics, at least if
gotcha.
that's how they wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're fine. Yep. Okay. I'm tracking.
Okay. Yeah, and didn't need to put like, because they don't have lecturer or publisher or the other categories psychologists did, so we don't need to add that limitation stuff in there.
Great. Okay.
Okay. And the rest is just sort of cleanup stuff about just that apply to both.
Yeah.
I took out some stuff that's redundant so we don't have so much words everywhere.
And those fees that you have listed here.
Yeah, that's the other thing is the same. This would apply the same consequences for late audit and deficiencies to the other profession. I mean, these have been here for psychology for like, I don't know, 15 years now. So inflation, they're a little behind probably, but I guess that's up for discussion too if the same fees should apply. And they do apply to counselors and therapists as well.
So can I
The same
it says
schedule.
here deficiency up to 20 hours, 30 hours, 40 hours. They're only going up to 20 hours for the 2 year cycle, right? Would we need to change that?
Well, it's necessarily capped for them because they can't be deficient more than 20 hours.
Right. So why do we have the deficiency up to 40 hours? Is that for psychologists too?
Because this is a rule that applies to both
Okay.
professions.
Okay.
Well, all 3 because we have psychologist associates too.
Yeah. Okay.
All good.
Okay.
Well, then we're done with CE.
Okay.
And I think the last oh, let me go back to the other rule draft because we jumped. Hold on one sec. So on this last, we jumped to the code of ethics and there's still a couple more on here. Representation of the public. This very much mirrors psychologist resident and then registered associates on the counselor side, how they represent themselves, and then scope
So
of
this would be
practice.
like on their website or whatever, how they describe themselves.
Yep.
Okay.
In your email signature, what you put yourself, if you do online advertising, which I think would be less common for this profession, but when you do represent yourself, you should be using the right title and using your supervisor's name.
Okay.
And then scope of practice, it's very summary and high level, but Rachel agreed with me it was worth repeating in the rule. Scope of practice. Like this is the statutory requirement and the rules which are in Division 60, which is the whole division.
Okay.
Straightforward.
Yeah, seems like it.
Awesome. Okay. Then I'll go to the statement of need and fiscal impact, which I believe I have open. Hold on one sec. Okay. So I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on this beginning stuff. It's sort of just technical stuff. This is how when I file with the Secretary of State's, I've got to tell them what we're doing for each area. So unless you see anything wrong or anything you want to talk about here, this is a massive rulemaking package. This is a lot of it's just moving stuff around so that this new profession makes sense in here. So
Like I would know if something was wrong here.
I know.
Looks good.
So yeah, this is going to be a lot, and that's also why I need a bit of a buffer to be able to like plug this all in. Like this is going to take some time. So I set the hearing date on October 22nd. That's just, usually I do it on the same day public comment periods are due or public comments are due. So if anybody does come and testify, I can just say, if you have anything written, turn it in to me by the end of the day, by 5 p.m. Easy peasy. The hearing is just something I, as the hearings officer, hold, and like it's not like anything the board has to deal with. It's just people can come if they want to give oral testimony, or they can give me written testimony, written comments. So the need for the rule is the first area I really need feedback on. Does this look right? And it's pretty high level, but this is what we're doing.
Sorry, Larry, I'm on a laptop, so I'm having, what page is this on in the PDF? Or what's the
I
section?
can zoom, that helps. In your packet, the whole thing starts on page 52, but the statement of needs specifically is on page 55.
Thank you.
So what you're saying in this section is this is the whole reason that we've got this Senate bill, and this is why we are going through this process because we needed to clean up, etc.
Yep. I
Okay.
mean, the last couple of sentences talk about like, and we're also doing these other things too. We're making the CE better for everyone. It's like we might as well while we have these rules open. And one of the more substantive things that it's doing for psychology side is we're going to take out that 1-year mandatory wait period when applications are denied. That's been a rule for a long time, and
Right.
we got rid of the 3 strikes you're out exam rules, so it's not necessary the way it was.
Yeah. I don't have any issues with that first paragraph.
Mm-mm.
It's okay.
This is, less, I need less input on it, but if you have input, that's great. I would love to hear it, but it's just sort of, here's where we can look our current rules, the laws, and then the legislation for the bill.
Okay.
But I do need advice on racial equity statement.
Okay.
So, Larry, I assume you looked at this, but when this came up through House Bill 4151, the SOCAC did a very extensive racial equity analysis on the what became Senate Bill 1547. That's all in a public report I can send to you. That equity analysis is at the very end of the report, but there's a lot of detail there. I think you've hit on the important points here, but I can send you that in case there's anything else to grab if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, I remember seeing it for this. We're not so much talking about how the statute is going to affect racial equity. We're focusing on the rulemaking. So while we're saying like, I briefly covered how it's going to have overall positive impact and those sort of things. We're more focused on how these specific rules, because we have to implement this bill. So that's already done.
Yeah.
So it's more specific to the rulemaking as opposed to the legislation.
So just one typo thing, kind of halfway down, or not quite. It says lower systematic entry barriers, paving the way for a more diverse pool of applicants to join the workforce or enter the workforce. We probably need a word in there. Yeah, right there. What do you think?
I think I meant to say,
The language as
I
it
think
is
join
makes
sounds
sense
good,
to
yeah.
me.
Join,
Paving
okay.
the way for a more diverse pool of applicants to the workforce. Okay.
Yeah. When I
Okay.
read that the first time, it's like it made sense in my head. Perfect. Thank you.
And this really talks about the equity. It's about people getting into the profession is, I think, what we're talking about here, right? Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, the rules do reflect the legislation, but that's why I left it a little bit more higher level, because that's hashed out with legislation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then the rest, like a lot of this is dedicated to the specific rule changes and like just in general, if we have a more clear structure, better terminology, references, contemporary standards, rules are accessible, everyone can understand. We don't have vague things that, exclude people.
Right. Okay. And you will plug in the numbers that we came up with earlier today here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly.
Good. Do we want to say that we expect this to be revenue neutral? Because that's actually lower than what our expenses are going to be.
Um, I left it in there as what we need it to be. Whether it is, I guess that's to be seen and heard because
Yeah.
we're estimating at this point.
Yeah. I guess we can leave it. I mean, that's our hope, right? We figure out a way to make it work. But I think we've talked about the fact that those numbers are not going to cover the costs.
I think that's the outstanding concern for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I'm okay just leaving it the way it is, but just for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then the cost of compliance, and this just talks about how it affects the agency. We can't really, and we're just talking about, we do have to absorb a lot of the cost of implementing these rules because we did not get funding. So that just talks about the impact on the agency, number one. And then under number two, it just talks about sort of references the fees above. And then it talks about, because the board is setting educational standards to a certain extent, a lot of it's named in the statute. They do have to pay for education and training to meet the requirements. CE, because that is imposed by the rules. We have to talk about a statement on the impact on small business. And because the boards, I mean, we don't directly regulate small business, we're still conceding here that there's an impact if they choose to pay some of the licensing costs.
Okay.
And I could not think of any other real compliance costs.
Okay.
I mean, those are the big ones. You have to meet the requirements, education, training.
Yep.
I guess I could call it specifically examination, which I did not hear.
Oh,
But
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the exam fee would be for the external competency exam.
I thought we said that the exam fee was included in the application fee.
The jurisprudence is the one the board develops.
They're going to have two different exams.
Yeah, it'd be like more like counselors and therapists in that it's the jurisprudence is laws and rules. It's like a take-home open book test. It's pretty simple. Like, do you know how to look things up in rule? Do you understand where your scope of practice is? That kind of thing. Whereas the competency exam is going to be the substantive stuff they learned in school.
Yeah. Okay. Just a time check, we have 10 minutes before we have to close, and maybe we had a plan on working for another 5, and then we can sort out what we're going to do for our last meeting.
Yeah, and the small business piece, real quick, that was just like there's just a statement in there that we have representation of small business. And then we're going to invite others during public comment period. Rules Advisory Committee, yes, obviously that's you all. And that's it.
Okay. Okay, good.
Okay.
So is that all for today?
I mean, I feel like we got through a lot. I was hoping we
Yeah.
would, and this is great. I feel like next time I wanna merge everything together as a final, document, a final package. I want to create a memo that would be going to the board explaining sort of where some areas of disagreement may have been, where there was some concern, like what we talked about along the way. And then this committee would maybe make some final changes if needed, but vote to approve the package.
Okay, great. So it sounds like great work, by the way, everyone. Today we cranked through this very well. What you can expect between now and our next meeting is that Loree will send out kind of the final look to this, including the ethics stuff that Kate worked on, so we can make sure we have a chance to read through all of those. And then theoretically, we can give it one last scan and give us our final vote, and then we'll send it off to the board. So I think that's great. Any other questions or comments today before we call it a day? Okay, if not, I'll read my script again. This meeting of the Senate Bill 1547 Rules Advisory Committee is adjourned at 3:52 p.m.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody.